Well, that Uncle Larry was kind of conflicted. At first, he wanted to pick Devil's Advocate because of its underlying message that if you're a defendant in a trial and you appear to be guilty, then God doesn't think you should be entitled to an adequate defense. Uncle Larry thought that was pretty repugnant. But then he realized, there's a movie that is not only far more repulsive than Devil's Advocate, but not only is the movie terrible, but the marketing campaign was even worse. And that movie is, boys and girls, of course, Contact. Directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring, and I use the term lightly, Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey, and a bunch of other people who ought to be ashamed of themselves. Now, most of the response to Contact was pretty good, but Uncle Larry wants you to know that he's just not a cranky old coot. He's got a serious reason for thinking Contact is the worst movie of 1997. And one of these days, the boys and girls will have to ask Uncle Larry to explain to them what he means by pandering to pseudo-intellectuals. But for now, you'll just have to take it for granted. This movie, boys and girls, while highly praised for its scientific accuracy, was, in fact, one of the most grossly scientifically inaccurate movies of all time. Right from the opening shot, where the moon is shown to be orbiting less than 1,000 miles from the surface of the Earth, and, the boys and girls all know that the moon orbits an average of 239,000 miles from the Earth. So that's an error of about 23,800%. And in that very same shot, they also imply that it takes radio waves 40 years to reach Jupiter. When Uncle Larry saw this, well, there's a scene in Goodfellas, boys and girls, where Joe Pesci is taken. They tell him they're going to elevate him to the status of a made man. But when they bring him into the room, it's just a dingy little basement. And he knows that he's going to get whacked. Just in the instant before they blow his brains out, he kind of goes, "Oh, no." That's exactly how Uncle Larry felt watching this movie. It's contemptible, boys and girls. The big payoff, the climax of this movie, the thing that these aliens send radio signals across the universe so that we can build these multi-trillion-dollar matter energy transport devices to hurl somebody through space. The whole point of all this foo-for-ah and 2.5 hours of movies is the aliens telling us, you are not alone. Well, boys and girls, did the aliens really need us to construct this giant multi-trillion-dollar device? It's sort of a symbol for the movie now that Uncle Larry thinks about it. Just so they could tell us we're not alone? Wouldn't it have been a lot cheaper and simpler to just send a telegram? And when you think about it, boys and girls, that's exactly what they did in the first part of the movie. So the payoff of this giant 2.5 hour trudge is something that you knew from the very beginning. What a jip. And if that's not enough, the thing that really... Oh, sorry, boys and girls, but you know what? The crux of the movie is that although Jodie Foster goes on this trip, it appears to the observers outside the event that nothing has actually happened, that no time has passed. And so she's pilloried in the scientific community because she wants the people to take on faith. Her, a scientist, has to ask people to take on faith something that she can't scientifically prove. Oh, it's so ironic. But boys and girls, why didn't they just try again? The device is right there. Why didn't they just drop another astronaut into it? I mean, when you flick the light switch, boys and girls, and the light doesn't come on, don't you flick it back and forth a couple of times just to be sure? Yeah, well, not anybody in this movie does this. But like Uncle Larry said, what really griped his cookies, what really made him go ballistic is the whole movie hinges on a key scene where this scientist, played by Jodie Foster, admits that it is possible to fake a radio signal from Vega, which is a star system 26 light years away, using an orbiting communications satellite. Okay? Well, boys and girls, do you know what? You can't. It's impossible. There's a little thing called triangulation, which prevents anybody from mistaking a tiny little low-flying satellite for something 26 1,000 miles away. But you know, like Uncle Larry said, the writers needed it so they could make this big point about the subjectivity of experience. So they fly directly in the face of all the known laws of geometry, something that has been a mathematical science for the last 2,500 years, boys and girls, but apparently that never crossed the minds of the people who are making this movie. Now look, okay, it's full of scientific inaccuracy, you're saying big deal, a lot of fantasies are. Well, it's the PR for this movie, boys and girls. Every single person associated with this movie went on the record. Uncle Larry read the reviews, he read the press releases, he went on the internet, checked the websites. All of them said how scientifically accurate the movie was and how proud Carl Sagan would have been when he saw what they'd done to his book. Carl's own wife came and said Carl would have loved this movie. But you know, boys and girls, that's a load of bullshit. Okay? This movie is it's grossly scientifically inaccurate. And yet not a single person in any of the reviews that Uncle Larry read mentioned any of those points which Uncle Larry brought up. Nobody else picked up on it, you know? There are people out there who are smart enough to be movie reviewers for major newspapers and on television who are smart enough to construct and maintain their own website, yet they are ignorant of the most basic facts of geometry and astronomy. You know, stuff that a junior high schooler would know. And that's what really scared Uncle Larry. You know, and in a sense, he almost picked this movie as the best of the year for conclusively proving what a bunch of idiots we Americans are. But he can't. Why? Because of what they did to Carl Sagan. All this stuff about how proud Carl Sagan was in the movie, well, he's dead, so they can say that. But Uncle Larry's got to tell you, boys and girls, if Carl had been alive when this movie was released, it would have killed him. In fact, Uncle Larry believes that if they had excavated Carl Sagan's body on the day that this movie opened, they could have scientifically determined that he was rotating in his grave at speeds in excess of 10,000 revolutions per minute. So to have all these people saying how Carl would have thought it was so scientific, well, it's a crass and shameless exploitation of a dead guy's work and reputation in the service of the quest for the almighty dollar. Even Carl's own wife sold him out to make a quick buck. So Carl, wherever you are, if you can hear me, Uncle Larry's got to say, sorry, Carl, but your whole life work trying to teach people about science, it was a complete and utter waste of time, as the success of Contact conclusively proves.